Hello, everybody. My name is Shishir. I'll be the DCA for SMVIT this year. So I'm glad to be hosting this workshop. Okay, just give me like 30 seconds and I'll share my screen. Uh, Sharing right now. Can someone confirm if my screen is visible?
Yes, it is.
Solid. Thank you. Okay, before we begin, I want to note certain things. The first thing is I'm not a fan of giving monotonous lectures. So treat it as more of a conversation because you will derive maximum benefit out of this workshop only if you're actively engaging and asking questions. Because the experience of judging is one that you learn by your own accord, which is you make mistakes, you figure out where you're lacking in the process of contributing in deliberations, and fixing your personal shortcomings is, in my experience, what makes you a good judge. Which is why there are hundreds of thousands of better resources that exist on the internet which teach you how to be a good judge. But I think the process of becoming a good judge involves a lot of self-introspection, which is why it will be immensely helpful if you ask questions along the way. Feel free to bug me in between if there's anything you don't understand at any point. Okay. As far as the topic that we have at hand is concerned for today's workshop, it's very simple. It's centered around how do you contribute in BP deliberations as a wing. A wing is nothing but another name for a panelist, which is a voting judge who has a decisive say in ultimately deducing the result of the round, which is, I'm assuming all of you are familiar with the BP format of debating as such. Is there anybody here in this workshop who doesn't know how BP debating works? Four teams, you have to rank them relative to each other. Is there anybody who doesn't have clarity on that? I'm assuming not. Okay, excellent. All of us know how BPs in general work, which means our goal in today's workshop is rather specific, which is how do you become a better judge, or more specifically, a better panelist. So there's a picture in screen, or on the screen rather, which shows an illustration of what a deliberation looks like. And for all those of you who have at any point of time been in a BP deliberation, you all know it looks something like this, wherein all of the people on panel are kind of reconciling their own take or read of the debate. They're agreeing to what they credited and they are explaining why they think one team is more persuasive than the other and things like this. Before we begin and get into details of how you become a better panelist or how you're supposed to contribute, I want to start out with listing down problems. And the way that you figure out problems is that you need some prerequisite experience of judging. So for all those people who are in the meet right now, how many of you have ever judged a BP round before? How many of you? You can raise your hands. Okay, Prachi has, Lanika has, Srijoni has. Okay, fair. A lot of people. Keep raising your hands. All those of you who have ever in your life judged a BP round. It can be a mock. It doesn't have to be a full-scale tournament. Okay. I see a lot of hands. Okay, excellent. My question to all those of you who have raised your hands is, what issues or problems have you faced while contributing in a deliberation? Have you ever faced something like, I don't know what to say, or there's just too much content flying around? How do I say it in a meaningful manner? What are the problems that you faced? Let's list them down. Okay, who?
First one would be that I was not able to find the clash. I mean, it's very difficult to figure out that what is the thing that basically to sum up what the what the one party has said, and then to understand that whether the other party has actually counter attacked them or not.
Okay, fair. The first inability is the inability to find a clash. Another thing that popped up in chat is over-crediting contributions. Yeah, buying whatever people say at face value. Grading can be a bit challenging. Okay, perhaps you mean ranking them relative to each other. What else is there in chat? Word economy. Yeah, that's a good problem. Basically going all,
Sometimes,
yeah, go ahead.
sometimes a little too much information to keep up.
Too much information. Yes.
Sometimes I am not able to be an average intelligent voter. I let my ideas and my knowledge seep into my judgment, even if it was not proven in the debate.
Sometimes you lose track of being the average intelligent voter or the ordinary voter, and you enter the debate with some preconceived notions. Yes. Prioritizing. Excellent problem. There are multiple issues in a BP round. What issue do you consider more important? Uh, okay, a lot of information at once, and thus difficulty to rank teams accurately. Fair enough. I see all these problems there, and all of these problems are extremely valid, at least when you're beginning to judge. The purpose of this workshop is to find some ways to get rid of most of these problems. And I think, or I'm positive, with respect to us being able to do this within, let's say, an hour or 90 minutes max. Okay, so these are problems that all of us face, and all of these problems are true because the way that BP debates work is that there are a lot of moving parts. In AP debates, there are just two teams. The clashes are more predictable. You know what teams are disagreeing on. This becomes a little more tricky to navigate in BP because you have a lot more rules. Closing teams have to find an extension. You can't credit them for things that opening has already said. Plus, there are multiple comparisons that you have to make. You quite literally have to make 6 comparisons in a British parliamentary debate to arrive at a ranking that ranks teams relative to each other first, second, third, fourth. Can somebody quickly tell me what these 6 comparisons are that one needs to make in a BP in order to arrive at a ranking? What pairs of teams do you compare? What are those 6 combinations? Anyone?
The opening, the closing, the calf, the op, short diagonal, long diagonal.
Yep. Effectively, yep, all of you are right. You compare the top half, who's winning between OG-OO, then you compare Gov Bench, who's winning between OG-CG. Then you compare short cross or short diagonal, who's winning between OO-CG. Then you introduce CO, who's winning on the op bench, OO-CO, who's winning on the long cross, OG or CO, and who's winning in back half, CG-CO. If you counted these comparisons, that's 6 different pairs, and you compare all these pairs in isolation, and then you arrive at a ranking that ranks 4 teams with respect to each other. The point that I'm trying to make is BP judging by intricacy and by design is more complicated than AP judging because BP judging is quite literally doing 6 AP style comparisons at once. Also, what is to be noted is once a BP debate ends, you get barely 2 minutes to come up with a call and be ready with your rationale, which means you don't have 10 to 15 minutes to think about what happened in the round. This just means that you have to think about these comparisons while the debate is progressing because you won't have time to sit and think through about what team said after the debate. You have to be ready with your contributions. So what we are going to be discussing today is just best practices that let you do all of this while the debate is going on. So let's just proceed with respect to what we are going to be discussing. But I want to firstly talk about what this workshop is not. Uh, yeah, okay, another problem popped up in chat. Yeah, understanding extension is also an issue. What is this workshop not about? We are not introducing you to BP, and I am not going to give you a detailed explanation of how to judge BP because then I think that will be 4 workshops in and of itself. I'll have to like conduct a lot of lectures to explain how BP judging works in detail. And thirdly, this workshop is not going to teach you how to chair because chairing and managing a panel is a very different skill when compared to contributing to a deliberation as a panelist. Chairing is extremely high responsibility because you have the time pressure of ensuring that each panel gets to say what they want to say. Plus, you want to have the oral adjudication ready. Plus, you want to ensure that the ballots are being filled, all of it in 15 minutes, which means the skill that you need to be a chair is drastically different from that of being a panelist. Hence, chairing won't be the focus here in today's workshop. It's going to be centered around paneling. What is this workshop about? 3 things: how to be a good panelist, how to contribute to deliberations in an efficient way, and third and most importantly, how to make your chair's life easier. Can somebody tell me why you want to make your chair's life easier as a panelist? Like, very simple. It's a very selfish answer, honestly.
You get
You get
better
better scores.
grades.
Exactly. That's literally the answer. The reflection of you being a good panelist is going to come directly from your chair because in a BP, your chair is the only person who submits feedback on you. When you're a chair, your panelists fill feedback on you. All teams who listen to your OA will fill feedback on you. So a lot of people are judging you as a chair. But when you're a panelist, your feedback or the reflection of your abilities in terms of being communicated to the Edge core comes only by virtue of what the chair thinks of you, which means you don't want to make your chair's life harder in Delib, because if you piss your chair off, that will be reflected in the feedback that they submit on you. So, in very simple terms, have a selfish incentive. Don't make your chair's life harder. Does this mean that you should blindly agree with whatever your chair is saying? No. And no chair will respect you for being a yes man. A chair expects their panel to have their own reasoning and to have logical rigor behind whatever call they are bringing about. Which means this does not mean making your chair's life easier does not mean you be a yes man and agree with whatever they're saying. A chair can be wrong. They're as human as you are. You have to stick by your call in terms of reasoning. If you are convinced by what the chair is saying, sure, change your call. But don't agree with them simply because they're a chair. But also don't make their life harder just because you don't agree with them or you can't see their reason. So this workshop is just about three things: how to be a good panel, how to contribute to Delip, third, how to make your chair's life easier. Let's get to the meat of the discussion then. And I won't keep this very long. Most of the workshop will be spent on Q&A. How to contribute effectively in BP Delibs. I'll just shift this to the next page. Okay. I think the process of being a good wing or a good panelist can be broken down into three things. One, knowing what to say. Second, knowing how to say it. And third, what to do during the debate in order to pull off both A and B successfully. The reason that C becomes particularly important is because of the reasons that I mentioned, which is you don't get any additional time once the debate has ended. You just have to know what the call is, which means you have to do certain things while the debate is going on in order to know what to say and how to say it. So you need C as a prerequisite to know A and B, but all three of them become collectively important if you want to be scored well by your chair. Let's move to the first thing then, which is what to say. This is in terms of substance, or what are the things that you will be contributing in deliberation. The first thing is know the rules. The manual is your Bible. The rules of BP, I mean. Every judge who is sitting on a panel needs to be extremely well versed with the rules of the manual. You need to know what is permissible at whip, what do you give teams credit for, what is their burden, what burden is implied by a motion, what burden do teams take upon themselves, what are the rules, what do you do when somebody is badgering. You need to know everything in order to be a good judge. I'll tell you guys a very interesting story with respect to knowing rules. This is my first ever tournament, okay? I am on panel, and the DC of that tournament is my chair. So he's quite literally watching my ability, and my future in the tournament is going to be determined by this round. This is round one of that tournament, and this is the first ever BP tournament that I'm ever judging in my life. I have read the manual in a very schemy fashion one night before, that too when I was extremely sleepy. I did not know the rules at all. Now, in deliberation, this chair asks me, do you think that closing government's material is derivative of opening government? And I say, quote unquote, yeah, it is, but it's supposed to. That's quite literally what I said in deliberation. Of course, I did not break in that tournament. But the reason this story is important is because it illustrates why knowing the rules are important. You have to know basics, otherwise you will sound as stupid in deliberation as I did in my first ever tournament, and that just ensures you won't break. So you want to ensure that you have familiarity with the manual. Second, this is very important. When the debate ends, the chair will give you 2 to 3 minutes to think of your call, and then they will ask you to share your call. Remember, you have to share your call with the chair, even if you're not sure about the full ranking. Do not make the chair's job harder by saying, I'm not sure, I need 5 more minutes, I need 10 more minutes. I am just sure about two teams. I don't know what to do with other two teams. Just tell the chair what you think your ranking is. It can be ascertained as the deliberation moves forward, but remember that the chair only has 15 minutes to conduct the entire delib plus fill the ballots. You can't delay the chair by 5 to 10 minutes just because you are not sure. Share your call, even if it is based on intuition. Second thing to note under this thing is when you share your call, you are only supposed to tell the chair what your ranking is. Just tell the chair OG, CO, OOCG. First to fourth, that's my ranking. That's quite literally what the chair expects you to tell them. They don't expect a detailed explanation of why you gave somebody a call. So what I've faced a lot of times is when I'm chairing and I ask somebody what their call is, the moment they give their call, they start explaining why they ranked a certain team first and why they ranked a certain team last. While this is meaningful, and I will obviously bring this up in deliberation, I did not ask for it right now. I don't want you to waste my time on panel by giving me justifications that I did not ask for. All of this means share your call first to fourth. Do not say anything else unless and until the chair asks for it. Thirdly, this is quite important, and a lot of you said that you faced problems with this. Judge the debate that happened. Do not enter with preconceived notions about how the motion should be debated. This tends to happen a lot of times wherein people think that this motion is built to be debated a certain way or some argument should come up. I gave OG a fourth because they did not bring up the most obvious argument in the round. You do not judge the debate based on how you think the motion should or can be debated. You only evaluate the arguments with respect to how they popped up in the round. Whatever has been said, you only evaluate it in that context. You don't posit your own expectations on what debaters should run or should not run. Sure, you can tell them that in feedback, but that shouldn't at all reflect the way that you judge the debate. Is the first bit clear, which is what you're supposed to say? Substance, know the roles, and know the rules. Share your call. Do not over explain until the chair asks for it. Third, judge only what has been said, not what you think should have been said. Is this clear? Okay, lovely. Moving forward, and I think this is the more important part because I think all of us at some point knew what we are supposed to say. But the more important but the more important and crucial element of winging is how do you say stuff. This becomes very crucial in determining how a chair will rank you. Now, this is not equal to yesmanship, but this matters. Be polite in a deliberation. Nobody likes a rude judge on their panel. All of us have basic rationality. All of us have listened to the debate for 1 hour. All of us have our opinions or our own analytical critique on what team is winning and why they're winning respective to the other teams. You do not have to be rude about any contribution or any reasoning. A lot of people tend to be overly condescending or they tend to be rude and dismissive in deliberations. You never want to do this because this just signals that you're not the best person. Now, of course, you would think judges should be scored only on their meritocracy of logic, but these things tend to affect your scoring at all points of time. Now, this does not mean that you have to be overly polite, or again, you don't have to be a sycophant at all. Just generally be a nice person. That's it. The second thing is, and this is more important, your responses, which is the questions that your chair asks you, your answer to those should be very direct and specific, which means if there is a clash of the economy going up between OG and OO, and you are a panelist and you have opening opposition winning over opening government, and I ask you on the economy clash, why do you think opening opposition wins? I do not want a full-fledged uh, yappity yap session on what OG and OO said. I want a very direct response, which is what is the contribution on the economy clash, and what are the two specific reasons as to why OO wins over OG. I expect a direct and specific answer to the question that I've asked. If I wanted a generic read on top half, I would have asked that question. I would have said explain top half to me. If I asked you a specific question, your answer should also be very specific. Third, stay relevant to whatever is being discussed. Do not deviate. A lot of panelists, or especially young judges, or sorry, newer judges rather, have this tendency to deviate from the discussion at hand. Remember always that in a BP, you are doing 6 direct comparisons, which means if your chair is comparing OG and CO on the long cross, you don't want to introduce opening opposition into that discussion. Do not deviate away from what binary or what clash is being discussed. The reason this is important is anybody who has been made a chair, the Edge Core has trusted them with the ability to reconcile contributions from all judges in order to arrive at the most accurate call. Which is why letting the chair decide what is to be discussed in the 15-minute long deliberation is very important. Do not, as a panelist, decide what is to be discussed and what is not to be discussed, because again, it makes the chair's job harder. It makes the delib time exceed from 15 to let's say 20 to 25 minutes, which is bad not only for the tournament, but also for the feedback that you will receive from the chair. Be very relevant to what the chair asks you. One, give a direct response. Be specific with respect to your reasoning. And third, if the chair is talking about a clash between OG and CO, talk only about that clash. Don't bring up opening opposition. Don't bring up a random argument that the chair was not talking about. A lot of judges tend to do this. If I'm discussing OG CO, they'll just say, Chair, I also wanted to talk about opening opposition and how they said XYZ. Sure, we are not discussing that right now. We will bring that up when we discuss opening opposition. Please stick to answering what I asked you to answer. This becomes very crucial. And the reason for this is not because the chair is dismissive. It's just because, as I said initially, there's a lot of time crunch and time pressure on the chair. Hence, they can't afford to let the discussion be free flowing. Their job, quite literally, is to direct the discussion to be very specific and pairwise comparative. Okay, this is the most important bit of being a panelist. I can't emphasize on this enough. All of you agree that you've seen a lot of panelists in deliberations who speak for 5 to 6 minutes. You can't do this. You have to be concise. Your read on a binary has to be summed up in less than 2 minutes. Now, your question might be, how do we do this? OG said so many things. They had 14 minutes worth of speeches. OO also had 14 minutes worth of speeches. How in the world do we sum all of this up within 2 minutes? The way to do it is use clashes. For example, if you think opening opposition wins over opening government, you don't want to say opening government said X, then explain X for 2 minutes. They also said Y, then explain Y for 2 minutes. Opening opposition, on the other hand, said A, said B, said C. Now the reasons as to why I think OO beats OG are again 1, 2, 3 random reasons. This will take 5 to 6 minutes. You don't have the time to do this. What you have to do is just say there are two specific clashes on top half. The first clash is on the economy. The second clash is on opportunity. I think OO wins the economy clash because they have two structural reasons that opening government does not engage with. I also think that they win the opportunity clash because opening government's responses to their material is only mitigation at best. They don't take down the claim in its entirety. So to some extent, the opening opposition harm of opportunity still manifests. As simple as that. Summed up the entire read with solid reasons in less than 2 minutes without being generic in nature. The goal here is do not yap because again, 15 minutes, you don't want to piss off the chair. Be precise. The reason that I say this is a lot of judges or a lot of panelists don't know what it means to contribute in a delib because they just transcribe speeches that were made, which is they will tell me for 3 minutes what OG said. But the question that I will have as a chair is okay, so what? I know what they said. I was also listening to the round. I am expecting scrutiny on what they said. This is the general structure of how a judge visualizes any claim that a speaker makes. They will make a claim, they will have mechanisms or an explanation of how certain things happen in their world, causal links, which is logic, explaining how logic X flows to logic Y, ultimately explaining how all of their logical flows and causal links lead to the impact that they want to prove within the round. These are the only three things that a speaker will use in the round. Your job as a judge is not to just write these down and repeat them verbatim in a deliberation. Your job is to scrutinize and explain how well or to what extent an argument has been proven. So if there is a jump that a team makes with respect to their causal links and impact, so let's say a team just gives you reasons for why there would be some violence between, let's say, interfaith communities, and then says that the impact of this is social anarchy and the country's democratic fiber uh, falling down. This is a huge logical jump because it goes directly from proving small inter-community conflict to directly jumping to the impact of social anarchy. Huge burden, not enough causal links. So when you contribute in a deliberation, your contribution should not be repetition of what team said for 7 minutes. It should be the team's claim was that they end up proving why, because of this policy, there would be interfaith conflicts. I don't think, however, that they prove their impact to manifest to the extent of nationwide social anarchy, which is why, although their logic flows, I think there is a causal jump at the last bit of their terminal impact, which makes their impact of social anarchy very unplausible in the round, which is why I don't think it should receive full credit. simple way to scrutinize what a team said and to what extent they ended up proving it. This is a precise contribution. This explains why or why not you are buying a certain impact from a team and what is the specific reason behind which you are not buying their case. This is way better than repeating a contribution for 3 minutes without adding your own reasoning as to whether or not you buy it. Ultimately, I think judging is just about asking the right questions. And I think there are broadly four questions that one can ask as speakers are speaking. Um, is what the speaker is saying true? Is it comparatively true? Or in other words, is it exclusive? Does it only happen on their side or does it also happen on the other side? If it happens on both sides, it's not their argument. Is it important? Why should the judge care? Is it comparatively important? Or should the judge care more about this than whatever the other bench is saying? This is also called weighing. These are the four questions that you primarily have to ask as any speaker is speaking. And asking these questions allows you to develop this scrutiny over claims. This scrutiny over whether or not you buy impacts or to what extent you buy impacts is your contribution in a delib. This is what a chair expects you to tell them. They don't expect you to list this down. They expect you to tell the chair what part of their links you buy and what implication you think those links have in order to prove their larger impact. Do they completely prove their case or do they prove it partly and make a logical jump? Is it clear what being precise means in the context of deliberations? Any questions on being precise? Okay, fair, it's clear. This is very important, and this is something that I was talking about right now, which is you have to find a middle ground between being firm and flexible. I'll tell you why I say this. There are two kinds of panelists that I've encountered. One of them just flip because I said the call is a certain way. So if I say I think OG takes a first and they initially had OG taking a fourth, they will flip their call from fourth to first in 20 seconds because I'm saying it. You are very unlikely to be scored well if you are that overly flexible with your call. That just means you don't have solid reasoning yourself and you are not standing up to your initial call. You might have had reasoning that might have potentially flipped me, but you never said it and you automatically thought I'm better, so you flipped to get a good score. No chair will ever give you a good score if you flip without explanation or if you flip too fast, which means there needs to be a certain degree of firmness in you defending your initial call. Does this mean that you should die with your initial call? No. BP deliberations are about achieving consensus, and people can miss certain things. You certainly can, which means it's about being flexible at the same time. So the first thing to notice, do not flip just because the chair says a call is the way it is. Retain your logic, or at least bring forth your logic for it to be discussed. The flip side of this is also true. Do not refuse to change your call if you're convinced. If a panelist has convinced me that a certain comparison should be looked at a certain way and I miss certain something, I will feel quite happy to flip. I won't retain my call just because uh, I kind of want my call to go through. If I'm convinced, I will flip. And this should be true for all panelists as well. If you think the chair's reasoning is correct and you genuinely miss certain things, feel free to flip. In fact, you should flip. But the more important bit is in the instance wherein you change your call, it is very important to explain why you flipped. A lot of panelists, what they tend to do is they will flip their call, but they will never tell me why they flipped. So I'm like, what did you think of initially? Why did you flip? What made you like what convinced you to change your call? What question did I answer? If you don't tell me all these things, I have nothing to score you on, basically. Because as a chair, I'm scoring you on your ability to judge. And if you don't give me a benchmark of evaluating on you on these skills, then I can't possibly give you a good score because you gave me nothing to evaluate you on. Which is why even if you're flipping, it's fine. It's not a bad thing, completely permissible. You want to briefly explain what made you flip, which is these are the two clashes that I disagreed on, but your reasoning made me see why I was being a little uncharitable to a certain team or why I was imposing asymmetric burdens. I see what you're saying now, and I think it's fair. Your read is fair. Since you address these two specific questions of mine, this is why I'm flipping. If a panelist tells me this, I will mark them quite highly because it shows me that they have a very good understanding of why the call goes the way it does, which is quite crucial, honestly, as a panelist. A panelist who does this, at least in my read, is likely to get marked way better than a panelist who just flips because the chair says so. Is the logic behind flipping being firm and being flexible clear to everyone? When should you flip? When should you not? Clear? Okay. Also note, there might be instances wherein you might not have the best chair and you might just think that their call is uh, just wrong. There can be instances in which this happens. Should you flip in that instance? No. If you don't agree with them, split and tell them that I see where you're coming from, but I don't agree with the reasoning. It's okay to be a dissentee. Now, a lot of people have like multiple opinions about this. People think that you should flip to get a good score. I genuinely think that judging is like quite an ethical activity. You should retain your vote if you think a certain call goes the way it does. Uh, I got rolled by two of my panelists in ABP, and that was the top room of the tournament. It was very high stakes for me. I probably flunked my score there, but I think I'm quite satisfied with it because I did not agree with the call that they had. So it's okay to not prioritize your score because I think the ranking that you give to teams as a judge matters more than your individual score, which is why if you are not convinced, do not flip just to get a good score, is what I want to tell you. That is a very ethical standpoint. Some chairs believe that you should probably flip to get a good score, but I am against that opinion. And I think judging ethically matters more than getting a good score for yourself. Okay, moving to the last bit then, which is what to do during the debate in order to pull off both A and B successfully. Before we move to this, I'll just quickly in like 30 seconds sum up what we discussed in A and B. A is just what to say, know the rules, share your call, do not go yappity yap about the call unless and until the chair asks you. Third, judge the debate that happened. Only scrutinize what has been said. Do not impose expectations on teams as to what they should be saying. Second, how to say it. One, don't be rude, be polite. Second, always be direct and specific. Stay relevant to the comparison being discussed. If the chair talks about OGOO, don't bring up CO, don't bring up CG. If the chair is talking about the economy clash, don't bring up the opportunity clash. Only talk about the economy clash. Be very relevant to what is being discussed. Then be concise. Do not repeat a team's contributions for 5 minutes. Nobody wants to hear them. All judges know what has been said. The deliberation and its point is to figure out reasoning behind why each team wins every comparison. Use clashes, make your contributions extremely small and to the point and efficient. Ultimately, be precise. Concise and precise are two different things. Precise means, in very simple terms, knowing what you're talking about. A judge can say random stuff for 10 minutes without making any sense. For you to make sense, all you need to do is scrutinize this link, which is what do teams say? What are their mechanisms and causal links for proving what they're saying? And what is the terminal impact or implication of their case? I.e., why should the judge care about it? Then scrutinize to what extent they end up proving their impact. Is their logical link, is their mechanism flowing to the impact that they want you to believe? If so, to what extent? If not, give reasons for why not. Your contribution in a delib should just be the scrutiny on this flow. Wherever there are gaps, you write down how, why, and you tell the chair why you didn't buy a certain causal link, or why you think it did not make sense, or why you think the impact wasn't proven to its full extent. The process of doing this is just asking four questions. Is it true? Is it comparatively true? Is it exclusive? Is it important? And is it comparatively important? Asking these four questions allows you broadly to figure out where the scrutiny is higher. And whichever team has more gaps in their logic is generally the team that loses. And your way of justifying that loss would just be the inability to answer certain bits of these questions. That's quite literally how you justify why a team wins over the other in a deliberation. By telling the chair that they did not discuss or they did not prove why their impact comparatively matters more than the other team, they did not weigh their case. Sure, I bought their logical links, but they never explained why this impact lands only in their world. I think it's quite reasonable to presume that the same mechanisms also unlock in the other bench, so their case is uncomparative, which is why they lose out. Asking these questions allows you to scrutinize this flow. And ultimately, this is just on flipping. Find a middle ground between being firm and flexible. If you agree, certainly flip. If you don't agree, do not flip. If you flip, explain why you flipped. Do not just flip without explanations. Is the workshop up until now crystal clear to everyone? Okay.
Yes.
Did you have a question, Jatin?
No, I misclicked. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Fine. Let's just get to the last bit of the workshop and then I'll open it to Q&A, which is sure, we know what to say, we also know how to say it. But the question is, we don't have time. That's the biggest crunch we're all facing. So the question is, what to do during the debate in order to pull off both A and B successfully? I think the first thing is take useful notes. This is by far the most important thing. The goal is to not get lost. And a lot of you said that there is too much matter in a BP round. We just don't know what is going on. So the point of taking good notes is just to ensure you don't get overwhelmed by the amount of information that comes up in a BP round. Because you have 8 speakers giving 7 minute long speeches, that is effectively 56 minutes worth of speeches. That's a lot of matter to be lost in. Hence, you take notes in a way that help you process information quickly. How can you do this? One, develop shorthand. Don't write speeches word by word. If a team is explaining some causal link which leads to an impact, draw an arrow to show how one argument leads to another impact. Draw symbols. For example, when I think that for all of you who know maths, you write dy by dx when you write a derivative in math. It's a mathematical concept. So when I think that closing government's extension is derivative, I won't write derivative in full sentences or full words. I'll just write dy by dx as a mathematical symbol. And that in 1 second will remind me that this case is derivative. So you want to find as many shorthand symbols as you possibly can. Yeah, it's a little funny. So effectively, you want to use these things in order to remind yourself whether or not a certain argument is being bought. So if I think a team is broadly uncomparative and doesn't give me answer to exclusivity, I'll just write exclusive with a question mark. That will give me an entire explanation of why they're losing in one word. I will look at that word and I will know the team doesn't explain why all of their mechanisms only happen on OG. Hence, they don't win, presumably. So you want to use shorthand. You can use different colors. For example, I write rebuttals with a red pen. Anything that is responsive in nature, I write with red. So whenever I see red on my sheet, I know this is a response to something. I also draw arrows to indicate what is that response to. So if OG said something, I write that in blue. And if OO responded to that claim, I will write that in red and I will draw an arrow between those two things so that I know that this is OO's response to what OG said here. Using this color coding and symbols, one makes your job of writing shorter so you can think more. But secondly, if you have color coding and symbols intact in your head, you just know what the page and what your notes mean at face value. If you write everything down in detail, it becomes too much to process when you're looking up when you're looking it all up at once. So you want to make it efficient for you to know what it means. The last thing is write your own thoughts about the debate, write your own comments. If you think an argument is bad, say that the logical link is weak. It applies only in very few selective extents, which means the likelihood of it happening is very low. Write down whatever you think about the debate in the form of scrutiny. Don't just be a transcriber. Don't just write whatever teams say. You are also to write what you think about them. Because what you think about what teams say are ultimately your rational points behind proving why they either win or lose. And trust me, for all of you who've been speakers, I'm pretty sure all of you have spoken at a BP. Whenever you listen to an OA, do you care more about the judge explaining what you said, or do you care more about the judge explaining why you won or lost? What do you care more about? People who have spoken.
Why I won or not?
Exactly. Nobody cares to listen to what you said for 7 minutes. There is value in terms of repeating what you said because because as a speaker you also have to be convinced that the chair listened to everything you said. That's important. But you don't want to spend majority time on rehashing contributions, which is why teams will always care. Even your chair and also teams, if you're giving an OA, will care more about reasoning of win or loss. So you want to spend more time on that. And the only way you will have a crystal clear idea of that is if you annotate on your sheet, which is if you write your own thoughts about what speakers are saying. Otherwise, you will be left with a word by word summary of the entire round with no reasoning of your own. And that's not a position you want to be in. Hence, take good notes, different colors, use shorthand, use symbols. They can be funny, they can only make sense to you, whatever works. Write your own comments. Then don't be passive. This is very important. When you guys said that, we don't know what to do in the round, a lot of it happens because you don't think about the debate as it's moving through. It's quite convenient for you to just uh, become passive and postpone the process of judging, because it feels like too much information and too many questions that you have to reconcile as the debate is going on. So you tend to think, I'll think about this later. The problem is you have no time, which is why the moment at which you try to postpone a comparison, you lose out on your opportunity to be a good judge or contribute well. Because if you don't make the decision of who is winning top half the moment the DLO speech ends, then once CG starts speaking, you automatically have two more comparisons to make. If you don't have a solid read on top half by the time DLO ends, then you will likely not have a very clear read on CG, Gov Bench, and Short Cross either. Which means now you have three pairs that that you have no clue what to do with. Then you again postpone the process of asking questions, and now member of opposition starts speaking. Now CO is into the mix, so all six comparisons have unlocked, and you haven't thought through a single one of them. This just means if you judge passively, you will be overwhelmed with the kind of comparisons you will have to make, and you won't have any idea as to how to rank teams. So think about rankings the moment a speech ends. If you think DLO ended, top half has concluded, you should have a solid read on who is winning top half. Does this mean you should have an answer to every single question? No, you can be unsure about certain clashes, and you can bring that up in deliberation and say that I wasn't sure about this. But being clueless and postponing the process of making a decision is like it will put you in quite a difficult spot, and you don't want to do that. So this just looks like evaluating the debate as it moves along, which is doing all these things that we just discussed, which is you want to ask these questions right when speakers are speaking. You want to write down your precise logic right when speakers are speaking, not after they've spoken. You want to write down the clashes in the round the moment they're developing. So if LO directly disagrees with what PM said, that becomes a clash. You write it down then and there. You don't wait for top half to conclude and then think, oh, so many speeches. What is the clash? No. Whenever there's a disagreement becomes a clash, write it down, write the rationale for why you think one team is winning. Evaluate as the debate moves. Do not wait at all. If you wait, you will find yourself in a bad spot at the very end. The last thing is have a meta sheet. And I think this is very, very important. This is an example of my meta sheet. This was some Australian tournament that I was judging last weekend. This just means in a BP round, you should have the ability to visualize the entire debate in a 2 by 2 box, which is I like to have a bird's eye view of whatever happened in the entire debate. This just means on one end, you have your detailed notes wherein you write down all arguments, all mechanistic links, all impacts, all comparisons. So on one sheet, I'll have just top half with OG and OO and detailed notes. On one sheet, I'll just have back half, but I'll have one tiny bit of paper that will be a 2 by 2 grid, which will have major contributions from all teams and reasons as to why they're winning or losing, and also the full ranking. The point of this is to help you be concise in deliberations. So if your chair asks you, what do you think the opening opposition case is? If a panelist doesn't have this sheet with them, they will go through a detailed bunch of things that they've written down in OO, and they will keep reciting that sheet for 2 to 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes, and then the chair will just get pissed. Opening opposition case, if you have a sheet like this, can be summed up under 1 minute, which is I think this motion was just about how the Church of England should not accept same-sex marriages. So no, OG says that it should accept same-sex marriages. OO says that it shouldn't. Opening opposition's entire argument worth 14 minutes is just that if the church accepts same-sex marriages, then members will be driven away, and it will also risk future recruitment because the church will move away from its conservative values. That's the entire case from opening opposition across two speeches. You can write it down in such concise language, and when you look at the whole sheet, you know what they contributed. Of course, this doesn't capture all details and rebuttals that they mentioned, but you don't need it to. All you needed to do is give you a macroscopic view of what happened in the round, so that when your chair asks you what a certain team said or what you think their position is, you can quickly navigate through the debate, as opposed to like scrambling through your sheets in order to find any reasoning that you can get your hands on. This improves clarity of thought. I genuinely think the more the stronger your ability is to condense information into simpler packets, the more clarity of thought you'll have. The more wordy you have to be about explaining things, or the more you have to write, the more unclear you'll be in your head, which is why whenever you write down things in detail, have somewhere where you're condensing all that information into comprehensible bits. This is how I maintain my meta sheet. I know I don't write in the most neat way, but this helps me give OAs and give feedback or just contribute in deliberations if I'm on panel so that I don't take a lot of the panel's time. Plus, I'm very specific and concise with making my contribution. Okay, so this was like the last tip with respect to how you should be proceeding in the round. Sorry. The question is, how do you maintain this meta sheet while the debate is going on? So if you write down your detailed notes from OG, the moment uh, PM has ended their speech, I will just write down two bottom lines of what they were trying to prove. And once I've written that down, I'll wait for opening opposition to complete their speeches. Once they've done that, I'll write down bottom lines of what they said. I'll do this for all speakers. And at the end, I'll have this meta sheet ready. The point at which you write these things down is when speakers are exchanging their positions. So if PM is done with their speech, sorry, and if they're moving back and then LO comes, in that gap of 45 to 50 seconds, you can write their contributions on your meta sheet so that you don't have to waste time while the debate is progressing. This just helps you be concise, be precise, and not get overwhelmed. Because a problem that you guys had was too much information, we don't know how to process it. This will solve that problem because it will show you the debate with a bird's eye view without getting overwhelmed. And if you need details, if you need nuance, you can always refer back to your detailed notes. But this is crucial for you to not feel overwhelmed. Yeah. So the TLDR of whatever we discussed is be precise, be concise, be polite. Nobody likes rude people. Take good notes. Do not be passive. Track and evaluate as the debate is progressing. Do not postpone the process of making calls and ultimately use a meta sheet. This is the entirety of being a good panelist and contributing to discussions. I will now open the floor to questions. Any questions or any problems that you guys have personally felt while becoming a panelist or while being scored by chairs or anything that you want to learn, feel free to shoot. Questions? Does nobody have any questions? Anything at all. It need not be related to what we have discussed. Yeah, Nidhi, go ahead.
Hi, so I find weighing to be a bit technical. In one of the rounds that I had adjudicated previously, the clash was a bit difficult because both of the teams had one constructor and it had a long-term impact. So in that case, how do you exactly weigh between the two teams?
Okay. That's a good question, which is weighing tends to be tricky because teams have different metrics. For example, if OG says our impact is long term, and I mean, no team would ever say that their impact is short term, but let's say their impact is not as long term. The way that you evaluate this as a judge is firstly to never automatically listen to what teams are saying. Okay, OG says their impact is long term, but is it really long term? So you want to figure out what their reasons are behind proving their impact. Obviously, this is very example specific, and it needs an example for me to explain accurately. But I'll give you an example actually. Let's just take an arbitrary motion which says this house would ban online betting apps. Let's say this is the motion. And OG in this motion says people are addicted, their family resources are drenched because of gambling. Hence, a ban solves for long-term benefits of familial life by solving addiction. Because if you ban, people can't gamble. Hence, the argument at OG is long-term in nature. Simple. Now, let's say opening opposition comes up and says a ban won't work because it leads to people gambling in the black market, a ban doesn't solve addiction. People gambling in the black market is even worse because it comes with the risk of imprisonment. Now, if you think about it, opening government says they have a long-term impact. Opening opposition has a very short-term harm, which is, you know what, if people gamble, then they have the risk of ruin, which is them facing jail time. If this impact is long-term and if this impact is short-term, who do you think wins? Who do you think has better weighing in this case?
OG.
I
Okay,
would still believe that OO wins this because OG's entire argument is centered that if a ban is in place, people won't gamble.
exactly. The point of me writing all of this down was just to say, just because a team says that their impact should be weighed higher because it's long term, does not mean it actually is. Their impact being long term is contingent on them proving whether or not a ban actually succeeds in solving for addiction or not. If their causal links don't prove why addiction would be solved, then opening opposition is right to say that their long term impact never unlocks because people still gamble, because people are still addicted. In fact, they gamble in worse ways because when you ban official apps, people resort to black markets. And that is bad because it comes with an additional harm of imprisonment. So family life is still bad, plus you face jail time if you get caught, which means even if the opening opposition harm is short term, it's comparatively true. Opening government's weighing of long term doesn't land because their argument itself isn't proven, which is why you never weigh directly based on blanket terms like long term and short term. You scrutinize the extent to which the argument has internally been proven. Have they actually proven their benefit? If opening government had multiple reasons to explain why a ban would actually succeed, then perhaps their weighing would have been larger because it unlocks way more benefits for a lot more families versus some people possibly being jailed. But if they don't prove their long term benefit, they don't win just because they say their impact is long term. So when you face tricky weighing situations, don't worry about teams saying that we are higher impact, more long termist, you are short termist, you are low impact. Don't worry about those blanket umbrella terms. Just scrutinize the extent to which a claim has been proven. If a claim has been proven to a very low extent, it's a very unplausible claim, no matter whether or not it says it's long term or high impact. Any claim that has been proven to a reasonably higher degree is one that should be weighed higher than whatever a team claims it to be. So if a team says long term, not sufficient enough to win, it actually needs to be proven to be long term, is the way that you resolve close weighings. Does that make sense, Nidhi?
Yeah, got your point. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions on how to be a good panelist per se? Any questions? I don't see any. I think everybody understood whatever we were talking about. Hold on.
Um,
Yeah, did somebody have a question?
yeah, this is not um, very relevant to being a panel per se, but it also seeps into the whole paneling thing. If how do you decide as a judge you are valuing the technical rigor versus the rhetoric of a case? Because the more I thought about it, the average person, the average voter is swayed by it's like swayed by rhetoric in the real world. So think about do I think along those lines as well, or do I completely disregard any rhetoric coming my way and only focus on the technical rigor of the case? It seems ideal, but again, this seeps into the whole judging process and it takes for internal, like the clock takes a lot more time before I come to a call because it keeps bugging me.
Pretty good question, which is, does rhetorical ability matter in the context if you're arriving at a call? Reason for it being, people in real life are swayed by rhetorical ability. If a person sounds right, if they sound true, people tend to believe them. But does it also apply in the context of BP judging? No. And the reason I say this is very simple. It takes me back to the first step of uh, knowing what to say, which is know the rules. The manual of BP judging, which is the Sophia WDC manual, explicitly talks about style as a concept in judging, in BP judging rather, which is to say that style matters only as long as persuasion is concerned. Style is not a separate criteria on which you're scored in BP. What does this mean? This simply means that a person who sounds rhetorically very fluent and has an accent that persuades you more than certain other accents, you are not to be more convinced on that style or that rhetoric itself. The only reason for which style might become a criteria for evaluating a speaker or their role or their persuasiveness is when they become utterly unclear. So if a speaker has such bad style that they're impossible to comprehend, no matter how hard you try, that is when you deduce speaker points on their end because they're not comprehensible at all. But does that mean me talking with great rhetorical rigor and like just sounding as if I'm right or having a very strong accent? Is that equivalent to me winning over the other team? Not at all. Style does not get rewarded as a separate construct. The manual specifically talks about it, which means as long as the speaker is generally clear and comprehensible, you judge based on logical rigor and clashes. This is how you evaluate. You don't focus on rhetoric at all. It's not a separate scoring criteria, which is why, although it's true that in real life people get persuaded by higher rhetorical ability, in BP judging, you do not get impressed by stronger accents or greater rhetorical command. You only focus on the logical rigor to which claims have been proven. That's how you effectively judge. You completely get yourself rid of any rhetorical biases that you might have, which is bias for accent, bias for certain choice of words, and things like this. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yep. As long as the speaker is clear, just logical rigor and clashes. Okay, there's a question in chat. If there's a bad room and not much relevant matter has come in a three-person panel, how do you stand out? If there's a lot of matter at opening, which is like 80% proven, and closing gives like one or two smaller links that does complete some of the opening arguments, but they never prove why that's the most important argument, does opening still beat closing? Okay, hold on. Okay, effectively, that's again very example heavy question. So I'll answer the first bit first, which is how do you stand out in a panel discussion when effectively it's a very obvious call because I mean, it's quite obvious why a certain team is winning. I don't think you necessarily have to do anything uh, like insanely different to stand out. You stick to the same procedure that we've discussed, which is you evaluate in the form of clashes. And I honestly think this is an unpopular opinion, but I genuinely believe this. Bad rooms are harder to judge than good rooms because there are so many gaps in logic coming from all teams that you kind of have to become a little interventionist in determining what team has proven what. Because if there's a room in which no team proves anything, it becomes hard to come up with a ranking that ranks all four teams against each other. If it's a good room, they do your job for you. They do all the weighing, they do all responses. Your job is just to step in and figure out who does a better job. In a room that is bad, you kind of have to step in and do a lot of their work for you. And you kind of have to do a lot of your work yourself because teams don't help you at all. So I think coming up with a call and resolving clashes in bad rooms is honestly quite a skill. It's not as easy as it seems. So the way of doing that would be very similar, which is resort to clashes, be concise, do not yap. If you think there are gaps in logic in OG, there are also gaps in logic in OO. The way you want to make that comparison clear is by explaining why the gaps in logic in opening opposition are still lesser than the gaps in OG. So you need to step in less and complete the arguments less in opening opposition, which is why their plausibility is comparatively more. So that's how you justify your stance in bad rooms. And you can get scored and stand out in bad rooms as well if you're able to do this. In fact, I would reckon that anybody who can judge a bad room well is a very good judge. Which is why I think it's not that convenient to judge those rooms. But as far as the procedure of standing out is concerned, you do the same drill that we've discussed in this session. But as far as the second question is concerned, which is OG proves 80% of their case, but closing adds very minimally to very minimally to their material, but does complete some of their links. Really matters or depends on what the 80% of the case is. What are they proving? Is the logical link that closing has added crucial to the entire case unlocking, or does it only unlock the remaining 20% of what they had to prove? So there's a lot of nuance that is very motion and debate specific, which I can't accurately answer here. But I think if OG proves most of their case and the things that they are contingent on closing for are very minimal, then OG still wins. CG can't just come up and say that we add 20% more benefit. And if they don't explain why that 20% more benefit matters than the 80% that OG has already proven, I'm not sure why they should be valued as more important than OG, considering they went after them. They do have the burden of explaining why their contributions matter more. So for CG to win in this case, based only on the information that you've given in the chat, they would have to explain why the 20% that they unlock at OG by their links matters more than the 80% OG already proved. That is their pathway to victory. If they don't do it, they don't win. But again, very example heavy, context heavy, so can't give you an accurate answer. But does this answer your question, which is how do you stand out and what happens in the example that you gave? Solid. Uh, any other questions? Feel free to shoot. Anything, any concerns that you might have with panel discussions? Okay, there's a question by Jannat. Just a sec. Uh, why can't I see the question? On bad rooms only, how to evaluate a round where one team provides implicit but accurate framing while the other gives explicit but very bad, irrelevant, somewhat framing? Okay, that's a good question. Can happen at times. If again the logic is the same, just because a team explicitly says something does not mean you buy it as a judge. You buy what is more plausible, which is if the explicit framing that they have is so unintuitive and so unbelievable that the average intelligent voter won't believe it in any instance. Uh, for example, if a team comes up and says that 16-year-olds are the best voters in the country because they are more in touch with the affairs of the youth, and India comprises, let's say, a majority youth population, that is such an irrelevant frame. It makes no sense. It doesn't explain why 16-year-olds are the best actors to make decision for young people, to make decisions for young people. So while they explicitly say something like that, if the framing is irrelevant and implausible and unintuitive, you don't give it more credit than a team that never explains why they want voters to be 18-year-olds, but just assumes that the voters would be under universal adult franchise and thus 18-year-olds. Now, in this case, OO brings about explicitly a very odd and unbelievable framing. OG has no framing, but their implicit framing is that only people above the age of 18 will vote. So if the question is what do you consider more plausible? Of course, the framing that is more plausible to the average intelligent voter. Saying something does not equivalent to proving it, which is why if you think the framing is unintuitive, you don't credit it. And you give reasons for why you don't credit it, which is it just doesn't convince the average intelligent voter. This is not interventionist because explicitly saying something doesn't equal to proving it. If they gave you multiple accurate reasons for why specifically 16-year-olds are the best voters, then they get credit for it. But them just saying that this happens isn't enough to get credit for it. Does that answer your question? Okay, lovely. Uh, any more questions? Anyone? How many of you will be judging an SMVIT? Okay, Jatin is judging, Nidhi is judging. Excellent. Who else is judging? Just the two of you? Okay, Jannat is also judging. Excellent. Yep. Okay. Now, effectively, what you folks have to remember for the tournament is just that you guys mostly will be paneling. So all of what we discussed in this session or workshop becomes very relevant to you. If I were to like quickly sum up what we did, and then like we can call the session off, which is be concise. Remember not to go all yappity yap. You want to ensure that the chair doesn't feel brunt or pressure with respect to managing Delib because they only have 15 minutes. Second, be super specific. Only respond to what they ask you. Control the urge to talk about some other issue if they're not bringing it up. Whatever they bring up, only keep your discussion and your responses relevant to that. Do not waste time. and ultimately talk in terms of clashes. So if a chair asks you, who do you think wins top half? Don't say, I think OG wins top half because they said XYZ. Because the obvious question after this is, so what? Debating is comparative. To justify any binary, you need to explain why OG's contributions matter more than contributions coming from opening opposition. And the way you become comparative is use clashes. There are two clashes on top half. On the first clash, opening government's material ends up counteracting opening opposition's material for reason one, two, three. On the second clash, I think the clash becomes a wash because both OG and OO have parallel reasoning without deconstructing or explaining why their reasoning is more plausible in the round or in the real world. Which means the second clash washes out. The first clash, OG wins because of the three reasons that I told you, which is why OG wins over OO. This is comparative judging. This explains why you relatively ranked OG above OO. The first version was just saying OG said XYZ. The chair would be left with the question of so what? Why do they win over OO? Is a question that hasn't been answered. So the last bit is be comparative. Ultimately, to make your job as a judge easier and not feel overwhelmed, you want to maintain a meta sheet wherein you maintain the bottom line of contributions from all teams so as to not get overwhelmed. Otherwise, you'll have four different sheets with so much matter that you won't know what to say or how to say, which is why just maintain a concise and consolidated version of the entire debate, which you can view with a very macroscopic lens, which allows you to be concise and ellipse. So yeah, that's it. Be kind, uh, be concise, be precise, answer what the chair asks you. If you flip, explain why you flipped. If you don't agree, don't flip. Uh, yeah, also don't just flip because the chair tells you to do. Maintain a meta sheet. Use annotations, use fun symbols, anything that helps you reconcile what team said in a quick manner. So yeah, that's mostly it. These are the best practices that you should keep in mind. Otherwise, the basics of BP judging, I'm assuming you guys already know. If not, go read the rule book. It will be quite helpful. Yeah, that's mostly it for this session. These are the things that you should remember while judging.